You know that proud, can't-stop-smiling feeling of graduating college? Mine lasted until the dessert menu. My father raised his glass, his fake smile shining, and told everyone, "Congratulations, Caitlin. But you're old enough to pay rent or get out." The room went silent, but inside me, something louder than his words started boiling. What he didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for years. Growing up, I was the one who carried the family weight. At 16, I handed over my first paycheck, proud of myself, thinking I was helping. That single act turned into an unspoken rule. I became the silent provider while my younger brother lived carefree. Every dollar I earned went somewhere, but never toward me. I bought my own clothes, my own supplies, while my father wasted money at the casino and my mother looked the other way. I worked myself to exhaustion, juggling school and endless shifts, telling myself it would all pay off one day. College was supposed to be my escape, but even then I stayed close, trapped by responsibility. My roommate, Chloe, was the first to really see me, to point out that I was being used. She introduced me to a financial advisor, and that's when I began keeping something back, just a little carefully hidden, slowly building. It wasn't much at first, but I guarded it like treasure. By the time graduation came, I had more than anyone in my family suspected. 3 months before the ceremony, I signed papers for a house of my own. Small, modest, but mine. I would sit on the bare floor, imagining what life could look like once I was free. So when my father shoved the dinner check my way, calling it my first adult expense, I felt the sting, but I also felt something stronger, resolve. I paid, not with the brokenness of a child, but with the quiet fire of someone ready to walk away. The next morning, I packed. They tried to stop me. My father demanded I keep paying bills, my mother begged me not to abandon them, and my brother just smirked, certain I'd cave. Instead, I handed my father an envelope. Inside was a spreadsheet of every dollar I had ever given, over $80,000. His face drained of color. Without another word, I walked out. Days later, they showed up at my new home, furious, demanding answers. That's when I laid it all out, the gambling, the second mortgage, the lies. My brother's eyes widened as he realized the truth. I stood in my doorway, no longer the child they had controlled, but someone who finally held the power. I didn't slam the door, but I didn't step aside either. My terms were clear, either change or survive without me. For the first time in my life, the choice wasn't theirs. It was mine, and I had never felt freer. I had just turned 23 and graduated college, but behind my smile there was a story no one could see. To the outside world, my family looked like everything was in order. My dad, Mason, who used to work as a systems analyst, my mom, Carol, who always kept things neat, and my younger brother, Liam, the carefree one. Neighbors waved at us on our trimmed lawn, people at church admired how polite we were, and relatives called us the solid Vances. But what they believed wasn't the truth I lived with every day. It started when my dad lost his job. At first, he kept saying it was temporary, that he had connections and interviews lined up. I wanted to believe him. For weeks, I waited for things to get better, but slowly the hope drained away. The bills piled up, dinners became cheaper, and the air at home grew heavy. The sound of my parents laughing in the kitchen disappeared, replaced by whispered arguments late at night when they thought I was asleep. My dad changed the most. The man who once fixed everything around the house and bragged about his projects now spent hours staring blankly at the television. He avoided questions, snapped easily, and carried himself like someone who had given up. My mom tried to shield us, smiling too brightly, saying it's fine whenever I asked about money, but I could see the stress in her face. She became an expert at pretending, at covering up what was falling apart. Liam didn't notice. He was younger, still busy with friends, games, and his small victories at school. To him, life continued like nothing had changed. I envied his ignorance sometimes, but I also felt alone because I was the only one who seemed to see the cracks spreading wider every day. We acted for outsiders. If relatives came over, my dad put on a confident voice and talked about consulting or taking time off. My mom nodded, never correcting him. They fooled everyone, but not me. I saw the unpaid bills stacked on the counter, the empty spaces in the fridge, the letters we pretended weren't final notices. The silence at home grew unbearable. Meals were eaten without words, only the scrape of forks filling the air. I felt the weight of things no one dared to say. My dad couldn't face failure, my mom couldn't stop covering for him, and I was stuck in the middle of a picture-perfect lie. I began noticing details others ignored. The way my dad's hands shook when he thought no one was watching. The way my mom folded receipts until the paper tore. The way Liam asked for things without realizing there was no money left. Every small sign told me the same thing. The family everyone admired was nothing more than a painted picture, and I was standing inside it, watching the colors fade. I still remember the feeling of holding my very first paycheck when I was 16. It was only $100, but it felt like gold to me. I walked through the front door so proud, thinking my parents would be happy to see that I was finally old enough to help. I handed it to my mom with a smile, not realizing that moment would quietly change everything for me. At first, she hugged me, said thank you, and told me how much it would help with groceries. I thought it was just a one-time thing. But the next week, when I got another check, she asked me if I could bring it straight home. I didn't think much of it. I wanted to help. Then the pattern began. Whenever I worked, the money wasn't mine anymore. It became expected, like part of the household income. Soon, it wasn't just groceries. There was always something: gas for the car, the water bill, new tires, electricity. If I hesitated, my mom's face would tighten, and my dad would clear his throat, reminding me how families pull together. I wanted to be the good daughter, so I kept handing it over. No one said it out loud, but it was clear. My job wasn't just mine, it was theirs too. As I picked up more shifts, school started slipping away from me. I came home late, exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open while trying to study. Teachers noticed, but when they asked, I just said I was busy. What was I supposed to tell them? That my family leaned on me for bills. That while my classmates used their paychecks for clothes or movies, mine kept the lights on? Liam, my little brother, didn't notice a thing. He still asked for new sneakers, new video games, and my parents always seemed to find a way to give him what he wanted. His life stayed untouched, like a bubble my parents protected. Meanwhile, I bought my own school supplies, patched up my work shoes when they tore, and learned to live without asking for anything. The unfairness stung, but I buried it. I told myself I was strong, that I could handle it. Still, there were nights when I stared at my empty wallet, wondering why no one else could see how much I was giving up. I was just a teenager, yet I carried weight no teenager should have to. What hurt most wasn't even the money. It was how normal it became to everyone else. No one thanked me anymore. No one asked if I was okay. They just assumed I'd handle it, like it was my duty. My mom would casually ask for help with bills, my dad would hint that I should cover something else, and my brother lived freely, shielded from the truth. That first paycheck I was so proud of became the start of an invisible contract I never agreed to. I wanted to help, but over time, helping turned into obligation, and obligation turned into silence. I stopped asking when it would end, because deep down I already knew. They had no intention of letting it end. I always wondered why money slipped through our fingers no matter how much came in. I thought it was the bills, the car, or maybe just poor planning. But slowly, the signs became too clear to ignore. My dad, Mason, would come home later than usual, with odd excuses about traffic or errands. Once, when he tossed his jacket on a chair, I noticed casino chips in his pocket. Another time, a folded slip of paper slid from his wallet, the kind you only get at a betting table. That was when the pieces fit together. He was gambling. It wasn't just a hobby. It was a pattern, something he couldn't stop. He would tell himself he was just trying to win back what he lost, but the losses piled higher each week. What little we had was disappearing into flashing machines and poker hands. Suddenly, all the unpaid bills, the empty fridge, the constant struggle, it all made sense. When I asked my mom why money never lasted, she lowered her voice, eyes darting toward the hall as if Liam might overhear. "Your father, he has his struggles," she whispered. That was all she said, but the heaviness in her tone told me she had known for years. She carried the secret quietly, letting it grow in the shadows. Instead of fighting against it, she chose to protect him. She covered overdue payments, made excuses about why things were late, and told me not to push the subject. "It's better to let it go. He doesn't take it well," she murmured one night. Peace in the house mattered more to her than solving the real problem. And so I kept filling the gaps, my earnings swallowed up by their silence. The differences between my brother and me became sharper. Liam came home to brand new consoles and sneakers, still living in the bubble my parents built for him. Meanwhile, I was stitching up my worn work shoes and saving scraps just to buy school supplies. He lived untouched by the truth, smiling without knowing how much had been sacrificed to keep his world smooth. My dad could still put on a show. At dinner, he laughed, asked Liam about his day, and carried himself like nothing was wrong. But I had seen the overdue notices buried under magazines, the phone calls where my mom begged companies for a little more time, the quiet despair on her face when she thought no one was watching. His mask might have fooled others, but not me. Each time I handed over the little I earned, the thought haunted me. Was I helping my family survive, or was I simply fueling his addiction? The answer cut deeper every day. My mom's silence made it worse. She could have spoken up, drawn a line, done something. Instead, she let him drain everything we had, while I kept carrying the weight they placed on me. That's when the truth settled in. My dad's addiction might have been the spark, but my mom's silence kept the fire alive. And I was the one paying the price for both. When it came time for college, I had dreams of going far away, maybe even leaving Ohio altogether. But deep down, I knew it wasn't an option. My parents depended on me too much, and I couldn't walk away from them without feeling guilty. So, I chose a school close to home, convincing myself it was practical. That decision tied me even tighter to a life I had already been carrying for years. My days quickly became a blur. I rushed from classes to my part-time job on campus, then home on weekends to pull shifts at a diner. Sleep became something I fit in between essays and late nights with greasy uniforms. Other students my age went to parties, traveled, and talked about spring break trips. I, on the other hand, counted tips and stretched every dollar while still handing most of it over to keep the house running. The weight of it all started to show. My grades slipped, my health declined, and I barely had energy to breathe, let alone live like a normal college student. That's when Chloe, my roommate, noticed. She had a way of reading me that made it impossible to hide the truth. One night, she sat me down, frustration clear in her voice. "You're not just helping your family," she said. "You're being drained by them." It was the first time anyone had ever put it so plainly. At first, I wanted to defend my parents. I told her it wasn't their fault, that things were just hard. But she didn't let me excuse it. She pointed out how I was giving up my future for responsibilities that weren't mine. Her words stung, but they also opened my eyes to something I had been too afraid to admit. Chloe didn't stop there. She introduced me to Ms. Webb, a financial advisor who sometimes helped students with budgeting. Sitting across from her, I felt nervous, almost ashamed, but she didn't judge me. She listened carefully, then explained how I needed to protect myself, even in small ways. She showed me how to create a plan that no one in my family had to know about. With her guidance, I opened a savings account in my own name, separate from anything tied to home. It wasn't much, just a fraction of what I earned, but for the first time, I felt like I was building something for myself. Each deposit, no matter how small, was like a step toward freedom I had never thought possible. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Liam. The account became my secret, something that belonged only to me. While the cycle of work and school still felt exhausting, I held on to the thought that one day I wouldn't always be stuck in it. That account, hidden and growing little by little, gave me hope. I was still trapped in responsibility, but for the first time, I could see a door forming in the cage. And I was the only one with the key. By the time I reached the final stretch of college, the account I had opened in secret had slowly grown into something meaningful. Every shift I worked, every tip I saved, I tucked away what I could. It wasn't a fortune, but it was steady, and it was mine alone. Ms. Webb kept me disciplined, reminding me that even small steps could build a foundation if I stayed patient. That steady guidance gave me confidence I never had before. When graduation was just around the corner, I received a job offer that felt like light breaking through clouds. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and for once, I could see a future that wasn't chained to constant worry. The moment I signed the contract, I knew it was time to turn the dream I'd been carrying into something real. 3 months before the ceremony, I took a leap no one in my family would have imagined. With my savings and a first-time buyer's loan, I purchased a small house tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't big or flashy. The walls were plain, the rooms empty, but it belonged to me. For the first time in my life, I had something that couldn't be taken away. I kept the secret close. Chloe celebrated with me, her excitement bubbling over as if the house were hers too. Ms. Webb smiled proudly, reminding me how far I'd come from the girl who once thought she'd never break free. Beyond them, no one knew. Not my parents. Not Liam. Keeping it hidden was the hardest part, but I wanted the reveal to come on my terms, not theirs. I spent evenings visiting the empty space. I'd sit on the floor with my back against a wall, staring out of bare windows, imagining what life might feel like once I moved in. The silence there was different, peaceful, not heavy like at home. In that quiet, I let myself dream of mornings without arguments, nights without the pressure of bills being shoved into my hands. Every corner of that house carried a promise. The kitchen, though small, felt like the heart of a future where I cooked for myself without guilt. The bedroom, still empty, seemed like a place I could finally rest without stress pressing against my chest. Even the creaking floorboards comforted me. They were flaws that belonged to me, not burdens placed on my shoulders by someone else. Each time I locked the door behind me, I felt stronger. The house wasn't just shelter. It was proof that I could take control, proof that years of sacrifice hadn't erased my chance at freedom. I knew a confrontation was coming. My father would demand answers, my mother would plead, Liam would be confused, but I was no longer afraid. That secret house was more than bricks and walls. It was my escape plan, my shield, and my declaration that I would no longer live only for others. It was the first piece of a life I chose for myself. The night of my graduation should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. I walked into the restaurant dressed in the gown I had worked so hard to earn, hoping for a rare evening where my family would simply be proud of me. For a short while, it even felt that way. My dad raised his glass, smiling as if he were proud. He called me responsible, praised my hard work, and told everyone at the table how strong I was. For a moment, I almost believed the praise was real. Then his voice changed. With the same smile still plastered on his face, he announced that it was time for me to start paying my share like an adult. $800 a month, plus utilities, or I would have to leave their house. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I had given them years of my earnings, sacrificed my youth, and here he was, turning my achievement into another demand. I looked to my mom, hoping she might speak up, but she kept her eyes on her plate. The silence said everything. She wasn't going to defend me. Liam leaned back in his chair with a grin, enjoying the spectacle as though it were some kind of joke. The people who were supposed to support me on my special night had turned it into a performance meant to remind me of my place. The worst came when the check arrived. Without hesitation, my dad slid it across the table to me. "Consider it your first adult expense," he said casually, as if spending my graduation dinner paying for everyone was a lesson I should be thankful for. My chest burned with a mix of humiliation and rage. There I was surrounded by laughter and small talk, while inside I was breaking. I reached for my wallet and handed over my card, keeping my face steady even though my hands shook. Paying that bill wasn't about money, it was about what it meant. To them, I wasn't a daughter to celebrate, I was a source of income, someone to cover the costs they didn't want to face. As the waiter walked away, I looked around the table one last time. My dad's smirk, my mom's silence, my brother's amusement. It all told me the truth I had been avoiding. No matter what I accomplished, no matter how hard I worked, they would never see me as more than a provider. I ate little, barely tasting the food. Inside, I promised myself this would be the last time they treated me that way. I had my own plan, my own future waiting. They didn't know it yet, but the daughter they thought they could keep using was already slipping out of their grasp. That night, as I walked out of the restaurant, I wasn't just a graduate. I was someone who had finally seen the truth with open eyes, and I knew exactly what I had to do next. The morning after the dinner, I woke up with a heavy but steady resolve. My mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. I grabbed the boxes I had hidden under my bed and began filling them with the few things I could truly call mine. For once, I wasn't worried about whether my parents approved. I was focused only on getting out. When the sound of tape ripping from the roll echoed through the house, my mom appeared at my door. Her eyes widened as she realized what I was doing. "You can't be serious," she whispered, her voice already breaking. Before I could respond, my dad stormed in, his face red, asking if I had lost my mind. He reminded me of everything they had done for me, and insisted I was being dramatic. I stayed calm. Every word they threw at me, every attempt to twist the story, felt like an old, tired script I had finally stopped believing in. They tried to tell me I was ungrateful, that I owed them for raising me, that leaving would make me selfish. None of it worked this time. My dad's frustration grew sharper. He demanded to know how I planned to survive and barked that I wasn't walking away without helping pay the bills. His voice echoed down the hall, but my answer was short and firm. No, it was the smallest word, yet it carried more power than anything I had ever said to him before. The rumble of the moving truck pulling into the driveway cut through the argument. My parents rushed outside as if the sight of it was an insult in itself. My dad raised his voice. My mom begged me to reconsider. But I kept carrying boxes, each trip lighter than the last. For once, their anger and guilt couldn't stop me. When the last box was set down near the door, I turned back to them. My dad stood on the porch with his arms crossed, his anger mixed with disbelief. My mom hovered beside him, her hands wringing nervously. Without a word, I pulled an envelope from my bag and handed it to my dad. Inside was a record I had been keeping for years, a detailed list of every dollar I had ever given to the household. Paychecks, tips, contributions for bills, all of it written down. At the bottom, the total sat bold and undeniable, over $80,000. His hands shook as he flipped through the pages, his face losing color with every line he read. Alongside the spreadsheet was a slip of paper with an address, my address. My new home. My quiet way of telling them this was final. I wasn't leaving with nothing. I was leaving with proof of everything they had taken and a life they could no longer control. As the movers loaded the truck, I stood a little taller. My parents protested, but their words no longer mattered. For the first time, I was walking away on my own terms. A few days after I moved into my new house, I heard loud knocks at my door. When I opened it, my parents and brother stood there. Their faces were a mix of anger and desperation. My dad pushed his way inside without waiting for me to invite him, his voice already rising. He demanded to know how I could lie about my situation and secretly buy a house. He accused me of betraying the family, as if my decision to take care of myself was some kind of crime. I stayed calm, though my heart pounded. My mom avoided my eyes, wringing her hands, while Liam just looked confused. I asked them why they had come. That's when my dad blurted out that their power had been shut off. His words were filled with bitterness, blaming me for leaving them stranded. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of guilt, but then I remembered the years I had sacrificed for them, and the anger inside me pushed any sympathy away. I told him he had no right to stand there and act like a victim. His jaw tightened, and he tried to shout over me, but I refused to let his noise drown me out this time. I pulled out a folder I had prepared, the one I had hoped I would never need to use. Inside was everything, the notes, the receipts, the records. I laid it on the table and slid it toward him. When Liam glanced at the papers, his eyes widened. For the first time, he was seeing the truth. Every dollar I had given, every expense I had covered, all lined up in neat rows. The total at the bottom stared back at him, a number so high it left him speechless. My dad tried to brush it off, but his voice cracked. That's when I told them the part one had kept quiet for years. I looked directly at my dad and said I knew about the gambling. The casino trips, the money that vanished, the second mortgage he had taken out behind everyone's back. It all came spilling out. My mom closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. Liam turned pale, his mouth opening and closing as if words failed him. My dad tried to deny it at first, raising his voice, but I wouldn't back down. I laid out the proof, each piece hitting harder than the last. The more I spoke, the smaller he seemed to become. His bravado slipped away until all that remained was silence. My mom whispered that she had known but never had the strength to stop him. The room hung heavy with truth. Liam looked at me with a new kind of respect, mixed with guilt for never noticing the weight I had carried. My dad's fury had drained into something else, shame he couldn't hide. I told them plainly that my life was mine now, and they could no longer use me to cover their mistakes. For once, there were no more lies left to hide behind. They saw me not as the daughter they could drain, but as the woman who had finally broken free. I stood in my living room with all three of them staring at me, waiting for what I would say next. For years I had stayed quiet, but this time I was in control. I told them calmly that if they wanted my support, it wouldn't be money anymore. The only thing I was willing to offer was guidance, how to budget, how to live within limits, how to repair the damage. But there was a condition. My dad had to face his addiction and get proper help. Without that, there was no point. The silence that followed was heavy. My mom nodded slowly, as if she already knew this was the only way forward. My brother still looked shaken, caught between anger at my dad and shame for never realizing the truth. My dad clenched his jaw, but the fight in him seemed to be gone. He didn't argue this time, just looked away. I told them clearly that if they refused, they would have to find their own way without me. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. For once, the responsibility was theirs, not mine. I had carried enough, and I wasn't going back to the person who sacrificed everything only to be treated like a wallet. Months passed, and I kept my distance while keeping my boundaries firm. To my surprise, small changes began to appear. My mom reached out, asking questions about managing bills. My brother took on extra shifts and stopped expecting things to fall into his lap. Even my dad, stubborn as he was, checked himself into counseling. Progress was slow and uneven, but it was real. One evening, I stood on the porch of my own house, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The air felt different, lighter, as if the weight I had carried for so long had finally lifted. My phone buzzed with a message from my mom, just a simple thank you for not giving up on them entirely. I smiled faintly, knowing I hadn't lost myself to their chaos. I had found myself through it. I wasn't their victim anymore. I was independent, steady, and finally free to live on my own terms. For the first time, peace didn't feel like a dream. It was mine. Do you think I made the right choice by setting those boundaries, or should I have given my family another chance? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.